and welcome to this week's episode of the Pages to Pixels podcast. I'm Keerthana,
I'm Rohan.
and this week, in honor of Pride Month, we're going to cover a beautiful rom-com on Netflix called Badhaai Do. Shardul Thakur and Suman Singh enter into a marriage of convenience, but chaos ensues when her unhinged girlfriend comes to stay with them.
Well, so I've never actually read that IMDb logline before. As you were saying that, I was like, I don't know if you saw the face I made, but it was accurate. That logline is.
Yep.
It had me in the first half, like that made sense, and then the unhinged girlfriend coming to live with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true.
I also don't think that's what the movie is about. It's not about the unhinged girlfriend. In fairness, IMDb also lists this as a crime drama. I think that this movie is a bit of a mixed bag for me. If I'm not gonna lie, if I watch it, I think it's very enjoyable. I think there is probably not a single second of the movie where I'm not at least a little bit entertained. With that said, it is made and shot like a mainstream Bollywood rom-com. That's not really my thing. Not that I don't like rom-coms. I prefer for them to have more of an indie sensibility to them. For example, I think we reviewed Lapata Ladies a few weeks back.
Yeah.
I think, and I know that I had two big criticisms of that movie, but I think it'd be fair that you could say that that's a rom-com, and I think that the way that it's written and the way that the plot unfolds, and even the way that it's shot, it feels more like an indie movie as opposed to one in the mainstream.
For sure, this movie definitely reads more like a studio movie. I do think it was delightful. I quite enjoyed it. I also think it's much needed representation.
Yes.
It's been I feel like I see queer stories like very, very, very rarely in like mainstream, like Hindi cinema at least.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was a delightful watch. It's been up on Netflix for a while now.
Yeah, no, I want to say I watched this movie like 2 years ago.
The story is very simple. Rajkummar Rao's character is gay, and Bhumi Pednekar's character is lesbian, and both of them are not out to their families and choose to get married so that they can pretend to be a straight couple, basically because they just don't want to come out to the world outside. And things go okay until Rajkummar Rao's mom catches Bhumi Pednekar, and she finds out and she outs them to the rest of the family.
Yeah.
That really is like the big complication of the film. They separate for a bit and then they come back together to adopt a child. It's a very basic storyline. I think the movie succeeded in creating relatable characters, which is what I really kind of wanted to go into in this episode. How do you write relatable characters in unusual situations to tell your stories better? I think the movie definitely succeeded in doing that, but I agree with you. I feel like quite a few of the beats were predictable. As soon as Rajkummar Rao's mother moved into the house with them, I could kind of see where it was going.
Yeah.
Like we knew that one of them was going to get outed. In some of the very high stakes, high emotion scenes, the dialogue work kind of fell through for me, especially in the scene where her family confronts her. I thought it was very unidimensional. Personally, I would have liked to see her point of view in that scene. There was a lot of quietness coming from these characters. Like we didn't see their point of view too much.
And I think this is where it's held back a little bit by kind of being made as like a mainstream comedy, where a lot of the second act feel like it prioritizes the comedy over the story.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, how can we create a bunch of awkward, funny moments? There is some progress in the story and the characters, but it really feels like most of that does come to a halt. For a big chunk of the second act, it's like, oh, we're in this awkward situation. And it's like, oh, who is this girl? Oh, she's the cousin. Oh, whose cousin? Your cousin.
Yeah, like a comedy of errors basically was the bulk of the story.
I think what fails to happen in this movie is that the plot doesn't build, but rather it kind of goes in a circle. And I'm sorry, there's so many easy like outs. Like, who's this girl at your house? Oh, she's a friend.
Yeah.
She was hanging out with us. We brought her home for chai. That's
a
very normal thing.
I agree. I think, would you say it's fair to say that it lacked like external conflict?
Unfortunately, I feel like there was more potential to explore that external conflict with the Rajkummar Rao character because he's a cop.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's kind of what I saw lacking. Like, I feel like our characters didn't really have goals. Like, what does Rajkummar Rao care about? other than the guy he's dating?
Yeah.
Like, what is Bhumi Pednekar passionate about? Like, if we had answers to any of these questions, I feel like I would have related more to these characters,
I think we both agree that Rajkummar was fantastic.
as he always is.
Yep. Hot take. Probably the best actor working in Bollywood right now.
That is a hot take.
Yeah. I'm saying best,
Yeah.
not necessarily best movie star or whatever, but I think when it comes to showing range, I mean, he's good at doing these mainstream roles, like we saw here, and he's also really good at doing the more risky, independent type stuff.
At least he does them in comparison to people who like do like, when they get like a couple of mainstream projects, like that's it. They just shut
Yeah.
the indie door. And we were talking about this a little earlier before we started recording, but we came to the consensus that Bhumi Pednekar is the kind of actor who will knock it out of the park if she's given enough material to work with. But when there isn't enough material to work with, she finds it kind of difficult to draw for her performance. And I think that was very evident in today's film.
I will praise her for this performance because she is always trying to add some layers and nuance to the character. She's kind of being asked to be extremely performative, be like overacting and stuff like that, which happens a lot in some of the mainstream Bollywood movies. And she is kind of saying, no, I'm going to deliver something else. And because of that, it feels like she's in a different movie.
There is definitely conflict within her performance, for sure. As writers, you have to first understand and figure out what your characters are physically doing in that scene. Like where are they standing? Are they sitting? Like, are they fiddling with something? Like, what is actually happening in the scene? The advice given generally is that when you write a scene, you break it down into tasks. Once you figure that out is kind of when you should ideally go back in and start writing dialogue, because otherwise what happens is what happened in this movie, where there's great like pages and pages of like excellently written dialogue, but the characters are just standing in front of each other and delivering these lines. They don't really have much to do or anything to enhance their performance.
This movie is obviously made to address a social issue. How well do you think the movie achieved that?
That's a good question.
It's a question that I've kind of been wrestling with.
I think if we talk about it in terms of bringing like representation into the mainstream conversation, I think it did pretty well. Personally, I come from a school of thought that movies should show life as it should be versus as it is. I just think they're more impactful that way. The movie has a happy ending, like a fairly happy ending, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that.
agree.
They did do the mainstream kind of like, I'm gay, but that doesn't make me less human.
Yeah.
You like, I'm still the same person. Like they did every single coming out beat. I wonder if it could have been contextualized better.
I agree that it should have had an happy ending. One of the things you also said was portraying life as it should be as opposed to as it is. I think that is a case by case basis. Case by case, both in terms of the individual movies, but also in terms of the individual viewers watching that movie. I think some people are going to probably be more impacted by a really intense, hard-hitting drama as opposed to a comedy. So I don't want to definitively say that one is better than the other. I tend to lean more towards dramas. If you really want to move me, I will remember a movie that made me cry over a movie that made me laugh.
I see where you're coming from, and I can see how it's. I guess when are you more likely to change your mind about something? Like, is it when the piece of art or whoever is questioning you? Like, I think personally, I'm more likely to be receptive of criticism and change my mind about a certain set of values if I'm offered those on an appealing platter. That's kind of where my school of thought comes in, where I think the happier endings are more likely to make a difference.
Yeah, but I do know where you're coming from. Again, I still think it is a case by case basis. You know, like we have Schindler's List. It was deeply impactful and deeply moving, and it is a very heavy drama. But then there's also Jojo Rabbit,
Right.
which is more comedic.
Right.
And I love both of those movies, but it's like if we're saying that comedy is better, are we saying that Jojo Rabbit is a better movie about the Holocaust than Schindler's List? I wouldn't necessarily say that.
I see what you're trying to say.
Now that said, some people, for them, Jojo Rabbit may hit them harder because it does go there. It is extremely comedic, but then when it gets dark and has to get heavy, it does.
It does without hesitation.
And that you can argue impacts you more because you're so invested in these characters that are comedic. And I think that's where comedy does work. It can make you, it's easier to get yourself invested in a character when it's like, oh, hey, I like that person. They make me laugh.
Right.
And then if something bad happens to them, you're like, oh shit.
See where you're coming from. I also think we even take like Schindler's List and Jojo Rabbit. I don't know how many people. Well, I don't want to underestimate. But I guess I was trying to say it's very unlikely that someone is going to be on the side of the Nazis.
Yeah.
And this movie is going to make them change their mind.
Mhm.
But when we're talking about Badhaai Do, homophobia is very real.
Yeah.
You can see it in the movie. The family, it was heartbreaking to see their reactions to it. They even have a doctor's character who's like, this disease doesn't have a cure.
I do think that when it comes to swaying people or changing their minds, if someone really is homophobic, I don't think they're gonna watch this movie and not be homophobic.
Right.
If someone is like an ally, they're gonna watch the movie and they're gonna be like, it's great, and it's not like they're gonna become more of an ally, I guess. This movie, when you talk about changing minds, it's really people who are in the I don't care camp.
Right.
Now this might sway them one way or the other, ideally. But I would argue that if someone really does not care and they go into a movie that is more of a heavy drama, and because I think that they can create empathy with those characters, I think that will also sway them. I'm gonna compare this to Lapata Ladies. I know I did not give Lapata Ladies the highest score. I gave it a consider instead of recommend. Although that is only because of two mistakes that I thought the movie makes that kind of were easy fixes. If you want to listen more about that, you can go to that episode. Not going to reiterate here. I think there was a lot more social commentary in a movie that is much shorter, because every single scene, every line of dialogue does not seem wasted. And it's progressing the story while also offering the social commentary. I don't think that Idol quite does that. I think there's a lot of moments that are wasted, and I don't think, as we said, I don't think the movie builds well enough. So that's kind of what I'm saying. If you're gonna write a movie that is, the point of the movie is to provide a very specific social message, you need to make sure that it is really, you gotta figure out a way to make sure the characters' goals and their motivations and all the dialogue is towards that. Figure out a way to structure the movie. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it definitely does. I was trying to figure out if the screenwriters they're both men. And I think we see the symptoms of a woman written by a man in Bhumi Pednekar's character. We'll come to that in a second. I also can't seem to tell if they're gay or a part of the LGBTQI plus community.
That is another conversation that I'm assuming they're not, because
Well, at least they're not out.
This movie did have a straight pride flag in it originally. It was, if you watch the trailer, they show a shot of the pride parade that happens at the end of the movie. One of the flags was straight pride, which is not actually part of pride. It's like an anti-gay flag that was made by people who got very offended by the idea of pride. And they did not know the difference to the point where it made the trailer. Now, when the trailer came out, they got backlash. That shot was taken out from the movie.
That's unfortunate that happened. I feel like, first of all, I don't know, hire better when you're writing stuff like this. And it should not have made it to the trailer.
Yeah. That's the only reason why I'm assuming that the creators were not part of the LGBT community, because someone who is probably would have caught that. But
no, it's good observation. I didn't know. I definitely didn't notice it because I was just rewatching the film.
Well, it's not in the movie. It's in the trailer.
Got it. Yeah.
But it was shot clearly.
Yeah, no, I mean, very unfortunate, and what a waste of money.
No, I think I made my point. Just figure out a way to make the story work, and really make sure there's no wasted scenes.
Real estate. Let's just really quickly go back to a thing I was saying, which is that Bhumi Pednekar's character shows a lot of signs of women being written by men, where either they're clueless or they're flawless. At least that's how I view both. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. Bhumi Pednekar's character was in many ways flawless. In fact, he kept her cool in situations where it was not necessary or warranted. When her brother comes at her after her identity, after she was outed, I thought, he deserved to be punished a little harder in that scene, I thought. He just kind of stops midway and her mother steps in and takes his side. It was a heartbreaking scene. I think that was one of the reasons that the actor struggled with the performance and the character was patchy best.
Again, you talk about the characters having flaws, and I like to break it down into two ways. There's the psychological flaw, and then there's a moral flaw. Ideally, a character can have both, and to define a psychological is when it's something that impacts themselves. Moral is something that impacts others, and ideally, a good character will have both in some way that they will then overcome.
Right.
And ideally, those are also related. I thought Rajkummar Rao's his psychological flaw was clearly his fear of being outed, and his moral flaw was that the fear led him to create up wacky stories and lies about others, including Bhumi Pednekar's character, where he even says that she's infertile. And now she does flip it back on him, but she does that's more of like getting back. But if you look at hers, it feels like she didn't have clearly established on the way he does.
True. I was just thinking about arcs too. I thought his character had definitely more of an arc than hers.
100%.
Because he starts off as a selfish brute, really. And he's a bit of an asshole in the film.
Oh,
But at the end, when he does come out, it is for very selfless reasons, which I thought was a really nice ending to his character. Bhumi Pednekar's character, on the other hand, because she doesn't have flaws, what is she overcoming at the end?
yeah.
Honestly, nothing.
And I guess you can say her flaw is the same as his, where he is, or where she is afraid to come out.
But
Which,
would you say that's a flaw or
I
a
would say
result of
that's-
her circumstance?
yeah, I would say that is out of circumstance, and that is the premise. It's related more to the premise. It doesn't feel like she's afraid of anything, but then she also doesn't come out.
It was. I feel like the more I think about it, the more I struggle to understand her character. So let's move on to technical stuff. Anything stand out to you?
Apparently, they added a little quirk to Rajkumar Rao's character where every time he turns on and off a light, he does it 3 times.
Oh, did not notice that. Interesting, because I feel like maybe, what do you think that added at
I don't
all?
know.
Right? Because that's what I felt about Suman, Bhumi Pednekar's mother's character. The fact that she was doing her whole on-breath, silent, whatever thing, it was purely meant for comedy. Didn't do anything for her character. I actually feel like they would have benefited if they had kept her silent, even in the scene after Bhumi Pednekar is outed. Because I just thought it would have been cool to see this woman so entrenched in her like, tradition and her beliefs.
Technically, I guess I did like some of the music. I think Hum Nung Hai is a fantastic song.
I will say, I think there was one dialogue in this whole film that really stood out to me. It's in the scene when Rajkumar's character comes out, and I think he says "gay hai hum." I feel like that dialect, someone coming out in that dialect of Hindi, was pretty cool. I've never seen it before. It might be the first. I just thought it was cool.
Anything else?
I'm not really sure if there was all that much storytelling with the camera. Nothing really stood out to me. Everything was beautifully framed, well lit, cool costumes. It
that I'll
looked
say.
stunning. I also liked the costume design for the person who becomes Rajkumar Rao's boyfriend. He was in these really quirky suits, they were really cool.
Rajkumar Rao got in shape for this role.
He did. He looks great.
Out of your juice. What do you think?
No, he clearly he did very well. Good for him. I like that they just turned it into a character thing where he's like, I wanted to become a bodybuilder, and no, it was good. Let's move on. What scene stood out to you?
Has to be the scene where Rajkumar Rao comes out. First of all, I think he does not a full monologue, but a mini monologue. The camera's on him the entire time, and he is completely silent, but he is reacting to every single one of their comments or questions or whatever you want to call it, and everything is super subtle. I think that's him flexing. He's like, "This is why I'm the best actor in Bollywood right now."
If I had gone first in saying the scenes, I would have picked that one as well. There were two scenes that I thought were very well done. The first one is the last scene in the film where Bhumi Pednekar's father changes his mind clearly about his daughter, and he asks her partner to join her when they're doing the little puja for the child that they've adopted. I thought it was heartwarming and it was the easiest way to show an arc. The other scene that I thought was very well done was it was very early on in the film where basically this kid finds out that Bhumi Pednekar's character is a lesbian and he blackmails her basically and tries to get her to sleep with him, saying, if you don't, then I will out you. That I thought was horrifying and so scary. The power dynamic between the two of them was horrifying and very, very realistic, I thought.
Wish that was explored more, almost giving her. I mean, it was an incredible scene, but then it's like I feel like the movie could have used that for more. I don't know. Like she can have PTSD or something from that scene.
No, it could have. It was.
It kind of happens and then
We just
it's
never hear
never-
about it again. Which
Yeah.
I'm just like, what stops this kid from going out and like
yeah.
just outing her again?
Right now it's time for ratings. As a reminder, we do the script coverage scale from pass. Consider, recommend. Pass is movie's not very good. Consider, it's pretty decent. Recommend, we really like this movie. Not necessarily a recommendation, just our grade. All right, so what would you give Badhaai Do?
I would say it's a strong consider. I would have said recommend if the characters were maybe a little more layered. But it is still a solid watch. Easy on the eyes, easy on
Yeah.
the ears, like nothing shocking, nothing that's going to like disrupt any
Yeah.
part of your calmness or anything like that. So it's a pretty strong consider from me.
I'm torn because I think this movie accomplishes what it intends to do, which is be emotionally moving mainstream. It accomplishes its goal basically of being this moving mainstream movie that has a social message. And normally when a movie accomplishes its goal, for example, Furiosa is the goal of that movie is to be like a crazy action movie. So normally when a movie hits its goals, I like to award it with a recommend. But again, that's not necessarily my thing. So I am going to give it a strong consider as well. Just wish it had a little bit more indie sensibilities. That scene of where the camera's holding on Rajkummar. Want to see more of that as opposed to the whose cousin is she? Your cousin. What?
Yeah. Yeah, no. Some of it was definitely, it felt convenient for sure.
Recommendations.
Oh yeah, if you do like sort of small world, simple movies with a bit of a social message, I'm going to recommend this very underrated Ranveer Singh film called Jayesh Bhai Jordar. It's about female infanticide, female feticide, and it's set in Rajasthan. I thought it was a wonderful film with a hard hitting message. The reviews were mixed, but I think it's definitely worth a watch.
I'm gonna recommend Aligarh. I think the tone is very different. It is also it is a movie about a gay man who is and it's based off a true story where he is I believe he's a professor in a university. Rajkummar is actually in this movie, although he's not the gay guy. But he's a reporter. But basically, the professor is outed for being gay, and that causes him to basically lose his job, and he's put on trial because I think this takes place before homosexuality is decriminalized in India. So this is a brutal. This is a brutal watch. It's not exactly happy. It doesn't have a happy ending the way that this movie does. And this is going back to our conversation of drama versus comedy. I think it is just as impactful because it does a good job of capturing the suffering that a lot of the LGBT community feels and has been feeling for decades or centuries now. Where I think Badhaai Do does gloss over it a little bit.
Badhaai Do definitely does gloss over it. I haven't watched Aligarh. I have read about it.
Yeah.
It is depressing as hell.
Oh, yeah.
But sounds like it's definitely worth a watch. And good for Rajkummar Rao really coming through for the community.
Yeah, he plays a journalist who's covering the story. Yeah.
I mean he's been choosing some good stuff.
Oh yeah, no.
I hope he keeps going.
All right, what else have you been watching?
This week I started a sitcom called Cloud9. I think it was an NBC sitcom, or I know they used to film on the NBC lot, like that on the Universal lot. But I mean, it's a sitcom. It's fun. It's on Hulu. If anyone wants like a 20-minute break in their day.
So I actually watched this movie because this is one of the movies we are considering covering. It's Majama on Amazon Prime. Also an LGBT movie. It's actually Madhuri Dixit is in it, and she plays a lesbian character. I think great concept. Execution could have been better. Again, it is also another mainstream Bollywood comedy with some ridiculous American accents.
Shiva Chadha is in Badhaai Do, and she's so good.
I think I definitely was entertained by it, but there's a reason why we chose to cover Badhaai Do. Right?
I think in closing, I think it's fair to say, I think the Indian film industry, especially Bollywood, has a lot of resource. They can afford a lot. They can also, I think, definitely afford to be more experimental with their stories.
Yeah.
Especially when experimental stories like Lapata ladies like Badhaai Do, they do so well. I hope we get to see more of them.
Did Badhaai do well?
I think it did.
Okay.
Otherwise, Kevin can cut it out.
Yeah, I know a lot of the ladies did well.
Okay.
At least on Netflix. I wasn't sure what the box office was like, but I know it got a very limited release.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is it for this week's episode.
Thank you for tuning in. Join us for a new episode same time next week.
Yep.
I'm Keerthana.
I'm Ron.
And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.